So I'm on a call right now, but nobody's on here because look, there's a Zoom. You know with that. I've put them all in different rooms so they can talk with each other. So they're all in separate rooms, and then in about 2 minutes, I'll pull them all back into this main room.
Cool.
Yeah.
When your dad want to go play pool?
What's that?
When your dad want to play pool?
Yes, or go eat. I'll probably be done at noon. So
I have a watch because it's invisible.
it's 11:06 right now.
Okay.
So this will probably take almost an hour, and then we can play pool and or eat and or whatever. Does that sound good?
Taylor, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My mic shut down last time, and I couldn't hear the other people on their side. So, by the way, thanks again, Justin. Hopefully, MVP is going last weekend for peace at the Clark County Food Bank, and then we're going to expand on Spencer. I couldn't hear anything. It was really weird. I lost it. I don't know if you can hear me, but anyway, yeah. So it'll be really good. I'm sure you'll see stuff about it. So, but thanks again for the. I really appreciate your help with that.
Yeah, no problem. That's awesome.
Something very good that came from this.
Cool. Good. Looks like we've got pretty much everybody back. Welcome. So hopefully that was fun and exciting. So right now I want to do two basically 1-minute highlights of people in the group so that those of you who weren't in breakout rooms with them can meet some additional people. And I get to put people on the hot seat. If you don't want to be, I'm sorry, but I would love to get a 1-minute overview from Jenny Cleveland and Ryan Bears.
Hi. Oh, let's see.
Yeah.
I'm Jenny Cleveland. This is my second time getting to participate in the group, and I really enjoyed it the first time, so I'm very glad to be here. I'm currently an EMBA student up at the U and have a background in hospitality and restaurants. Undergraduate, it was in biology and chemistry, and then went to culinary school, and now I'm back in school up at the U, and have recently transitioned out of restaurants, and I'm currently at BioFire. Got connected with this group through Spencer Walker, so very glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Spencer. Okay.
Ryan. My name's Ryan Bars. So I'm a co-founder of a company called Scribed Sciences that is spinning out from the University of Utah. And so we build data loggers, so basically field-ready computers for both scientific and industrial applications. And really the goal is to allow users to consolidate their data and then move it over to the cloud into our ecosystem, which has a ton of very, very powerful ways to visualize your data. So our goal is basically just to allow people to make the best use of their data possible.
How is your business going, Ryan? I can't help but jump in. I mean, it sounds like a really cool idea. It makes sense. You got to get data. Sometimes you need to do it mobilely. How is the business?
Yeah, things are going really well. So we originally started with a couple of grants from the state of Utah, and we've been working on some really interesting projects with some large, basically oil companies, helping them develop custom scientific platforms using our technology and our cloud infrastructure. So we have some really exciting projects moving forward right now.
Cool. I have some experience in oil and gas. I don't know if you have any open questions in that world, but if you ever want to chat about it, I'd love to talk if I could help any.
Yeah, I'd love to connect. I'll shoot you my email.
Awesome. Hey, good luck with your business.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Ryan, I'm sorry I mispronounced your last name. I apologize.
No worries at all. It happens all the time.
So next up is the weekly expert presentation. I think I'm excited to have Austin Bankhead talk to us today. So Austin and I are close geographically neighbors. And so we met and also played pickleball together, which is fun. And that's kind of where I learned what Austin was up to and his experience in building sales ops teams or sales operations basically in general. And so Austin, I'll let you give a little bit more of your background and then jump into your presentation. You should be able to share your screen, and I'll turn the screen over to you now.
Okay, folks. Good morning. Good late morning to you all. My name is Austin Bankhead. I am going to talk to you about revenue operations, which includes sales operations. It's just a bit more. And I am 6 months into starting my own company called Unicorn Revenue Operations. And I'll tell you a little bit about my background in a minute. I've got a set of slides for you to go through with you. As I'll talk in a minute, I come from probably a larger company bias than probably many of you. This is more of the entrepreneurial group, so I'm giving my first shot here as a budding entrepreneur. So I've got some slides. Let me show you what I was planning to go through today. I'll just click here. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my background. Then we'll spend most of the time today talking about what is revenue operations and challenges in revenue operations that companies experience. Many of these challenges will be ones that you will just start to see if your company is going from kind of early growth stage to sort of you got product market fit, you're starting to hire salespeople. So we'll talk about some common challenges. I'll end with giving you 4 specific things you can do today if you have a sales team or a revenue team that you can focus on to improve your revenue operations, and then we'll end the time with Q&A. That said, if along the way this isn't a massive group, there are questions or comments people have, feel free to use the chat box on Zoom. And Taylor, if I can impinge on you and ask you to sort of interrupt me or moderate a bit, that would be great, since I'll probably just be focused on what I'm trying to say. So before I get going, I just want to thank Taylor for the chance to present. This has been kind of fun for me to participate in this group, and it's also been at times I needed a kick in the pants to sort of get my marketing aspect to get my work together. So I appreciate the invite. So just a little bit about me. I'm going to have a little bit of a checkered past. What's most relevant to our discussion today is I've spent about 18 years in B2B sales and marketing. The last 10 to 12 of it here in Utah. I worked in Omniture and Adobe in marketing primarily. I was pulled away to go work at Qualtrics, which was a really good decision. In hindsight, I had a really great chance to work in marketing there and then discover sales operations and built the sales operations organization for Qualtrics from 2012 to 2018. I took an opportunity to try to do it again at Snap Finance, which is a very successful, large, fast-growing company in Salt Lake that many of you probably have not heard of. Flies under the radar, but really impressive business. And I did that for about 1.5 years before going out on my own. So my sort of specialty and lens in which I'm going to talk today is how do you take a company that has good product market fit and is really trying to scale, and how do you scale up a revenue organization to support high double-digit growth every quarter over quarter, every quarter for a sustained period of time. And so some of the things that I'll talk about today may not be applicable to you. They may never be applicable to your firm, but if they are, if you have that potential and you want that potential to grow like these companies, Omniture, Adobe, Qualtrics, and Snap, you might learn a few things and you'll eventually run into some of the things that we'll talk about today. So that's sort of the lens and approach that I'm going to take. So first off, what is revenue operations? Well, it's kind of a growing field. It's really a combination of the operational functions of whatever it takes to drive revenue. So here is a very unofficial Austin definition. It's the function that directs the processes, systems, and technology that support frontline revenue teams. And that can be in marketing, and that can be in sales. And then, especially in a SaaS business model, it can be what's usually called client success, or sometimes customer success, which is the function that owns getting customers to expand their usage and spend with your company's products, renewing it, and otherwise growing the business outside of adding new logos to the company, which is generally the domain of a traditional direct B2B sales team or channel partner team. So revenue operations, think of it as the COO or operational function for everything related to revenue in the company. What you might think, what kind of problems or questions come under the purview of revenue operations? Here's a sample of a few of them. So in a fast growing company, for example, you need to hire a lot of people. You might have to hire, when I say a lot, you could be hiring 20 to 50 to 100 reps a quarter. That sounds like a lot when your company is about 20 people, but when you get to a company around the size of 200 to 300 people and you want to grow and hit revenue targets, you may need to hire that many people. And so it's like, how do you onboard and just actually run a recruiting operation to hire so many people? For every salesperson or for every client success person, you need to assign a territory or batch of accounts. Well, how do you do that? How many territories do you need? How many accounts are available out there? What is your market? What products do they carry? A lot of times companies struggle with how to have a good CRM and have data in that CRM be accurate and actionable. And that is a function of operations, revenue operations. What should your salespeople do to close the deals? How many phone calls should they be making? How many emails do they make? What should those emails say? How do you provide them with the tools and technology to respond quickly to customers and client success? How do you pass leads from the sales organization, from the marketing organization to the sales team? What are the mechanics to do that? And how do you know if you're doing it successfully? These are typical examples of challenges or responsibilities that a revenue operations function would manage. And so that will hopefully give you a sense for sort of the landscape in which revenue operations will operate. Okay. Just diving in a little more specifically, I try to think of revenue operations as having 10 specific functions, and these are required, meaning you're going to have them at some point, and they really work together. Let me give you a few examples. For example, one thing that you'll want to have as you hire client success and marketing and salespeople is you want to have a career path for them, especially in sales. Salespeople want to progress, they want to be promoted. And you have to have a sustained and consistent way of doing that. Well, one of the ways, so career development is a responsibility of a senior revenue operations and revenue leader, but you can't really promote people unless you learn how to teach them and to enable them, to help them learn how to be successful. This is particularly true when you're developing sales managers. How do managers coach? How do they have one-on-ones? How do they learn to hold their teams accountable using metrics? And so enablement and career development are tied together, even though they are separate functions. Another set is coverage and tech stack. Coverage has to do with how many accounts you have, how you assign your territories, and who owns what products. Well, that is nearly impossible to do if you don't have good data in a CRM that uses that data to know how many accounts you have, how productive those accounts are, and how to assign those accounts out to reps. So a salesperson or a client success staff member knows the accounts that he or she's in charge of and has the data to be able to manage and optimize those accounts. A couple of more quick ones. Compensation. How do you pay people? Compensation is so important for revenue operations and for salespeople specifically. What are their quotas? How are you going to provide a comp plan that drives the right behavior? And a lot of that's driven around the metrics that you have. Well, if you don't have the right metrics that measure success and you don't know how to track them and present them to the reps, then how are you possibly going to pay them on what you want them to do? So that's another example of how different areas of revenue operations kind of are interrelated and interdependent. And then last but not least, deal support, process improvement, and cross-functional alignment really center around how do you get the rest of your organization to support revenue generation, and how do you maximize the time that your sales and your client success people spend working with and talking to customers to grow or retain revenue, as opposed to trying to navigate the various processes and policies that your company has that, although they are well-founded, can often trip these people up and cause them to be less productive than you would want to be. So that's sort of an overview of revenue operations and the disciplines in them. Let me just pause there and see if there are any questions either on the chat line or if anyone just wants to unmute and just throw out a question just for a little bit of audience participation here.
Austin, I think this is awesome, and I'm curious, and you're probably about to jump into this, but I'm curious to see how you then, as Unicorn Revenue Operations, is it a consultancy or are there you recommend software? I'm just curious to see how you work.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Spencer. So I'll just briefly mention this because it's not designed to be a pitch per se, but the company is me at this point, but I have other colleagues that are either consulting on their own or employed that help me provide sort of guidance on this. But I basically work as a coach, meaning if you have good people in place, but they haven't had the experience level that you think they need, I can provide coaching and advice to them. I have several clients where I come in and do project work. For example, I'm helping a company right now redesign their compensation plan. And we'll talk about compensation challenges in a minute as a case study. And then also, if a company is looking for a senior revenue ops person or leader or sales enablement leader, but they don't have someone in place, I could certainly come and function as an interim leader for a few months, if that is the case, me, just to sort of get critical things done and keep the motion going while they search for the right person. So it's either on a project, coach, or interim leader type basis. Does that answer your question, Spencer? Thank you.
Austin, I've got one question for you on this slide before you jump off of it.
Yeah, sure.
Just maybe specifically for compensation and performance management, what is your process or methodology for figuring out how those two are tied? Like, do you go through kind of a systems audit on both of those and say, okay, this is how the data is talking to each other? Or what is the way that you say, okay, you've got to make sure compensation and performance management are tied together? Then what's your next step of kind of assessing that?
Yeah, so just at a high level, I think you can look at each of these things separately. For example, in compensation, you want to make sure, what are the behaviors? What do I want our reps to do? What's their job? And how do I motivate them to do that? Making sure the economics of the compensation plan are aligned with the economics of the company. And we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. But then you also have to think about what do I want to incentivize my reps to do, for example, on what kind of pipeline do they need to have? Should I be compensating them or somehow recognizing them for different types of activities? So performance, I would go in and kind of do a diagnosis of each, but then see where the nexus point is, which is typically around pipeline generation or actually closing deals. And then performance management often is, think of compensation as how do my reps get paid when they bring in business? And think of performance management as what are the things that reps need to do so that they do hit their quota and they do get paid? Because if you have a lot of reps and they're not hitting their number, not only are they not getting paid, but your business isn't making any money. And you want them to be as productive as possible. So compensation and quota, hitting your target is sort of the outcome of a range of funnel activities that will lead to that. So I don't know if that answers the question as well as the person that asked it would want, but I can certainly offline with them afterwards.
And Austin, you may have kind of alluded to this, but do you specialize in any kind of particular industry? You may have kind of specialization in SaaS based on your background.
Yeah, so my experience is primarily around SaaS and fintech with inside or field salespeople, but most of the principles I'm talking about apply to any type of company. They may vary a little bit based on the size and the business model. For example, a SaaS business model is going to have some different issues around compensation and coverage. In performance management, then one where you're just selling a widget and there's really very limited or simple post-customer service and not expansion. But the principles are basically the same across. Okay. So let me go to the next slide. I'm going to now go through 3 examples of challenges that are common to high growth or moderate growth companies that deal with revenue operations. This will just help give you a little more tangible example of what sort of problems your company may have or companies may have that a revenue operations function can help address. The first is around compensation. And this is one that I have run into repeatedly and is one of the most devastating problems that, if not addressed early, can create in a company. And that is what you do when you have an annuity-based compensation plan. So you guys can read through the bullets, but basically the idea is this. Early on, when a company starts and they pay the salespeople, they say, hey, we need people that are really entrepreneurial, that have a vision for the company, they want to get rich, but they're willing to really work hard. And we're going to give them a percentage of the revenue that their customers that they acquire bring in. And we will do it for the life of, as long as that customer is with our company and as long as that rep is assigned to the customer. So these models are common in insurance and financial services, and sometimes in multi-level marketing, and sometimes they get applied in other types of industries. Here's what, so the benefit of is like the reps are like, oh, this is going to be great. I get a vision. I'm going to have my own book of business. I'll be my own entrepreneur, my own business. I'm going to make a ton of money. And so it works really great going forward, and the cost doesn't get very, very high. What happens is 2 or 3 years into it, a rep keeps acquiring customers. And so just like this illustration shows, their compensation starts growing bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And the challenge is that unless that salesperson is actually having to go re-win and rework that business, it becomes an annuity that is costly to the company and for which the rep hardly does anything. There's often customer support or client success staff that continue to service and relate to the customer. And the rep is basically getting an income stream year after year for work he or she did several years prior. The downside is that now reps start to make a ton of money without having to work very hard necessarily. The rep would disagree, but just hear me out. What they're getting paid may not match the value they continually create for that customer and for the organization. And then, more perniciously, when you try to expand, and early on, a rep has a very large territory, but as you try to have more territories and go deeper into a geographic or industry, if you want to move an account to have it grow, when you move that account, it takes away that income stream from that rep. So they may be getting $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year from a few accounts. You move that account away because you want to treat it differently. That rep is going to be infuriated, very, very angry. And so it can really hurt your culture, and it can hurt rep morale, and understandably, because if you had 20 to 50 grand or whatever the amount is taken away from you, you'd kind of be upset too. Well, reps get really upset about that. And so the solution is to never do that in the first place, okay? Or to set up very strict expectations and parameters around which you define what the rep is going to do for that income stream and how that's going to evolve over time. And you think ahead, and this is the common theme of my presentation today, you think ahead with what's going to happen when my company's 2 to 3 to 4 times bigger than it is today, and how will that impact my compensation? So this is one that, fixing this costs, hundreds of hours of management and rep time. That's a massive sag in morale. It can be very expensive because you kind of have to buy the reps out, and then sometimes some of them will leave. So best to never create it in the first place. Okay, next one, completely different topic. I'm not a really big fan of searching for images, but searching for images of trash was kind of a disturbing exercise. But I want you to look at this picture here, and I want to think about the data that's in your company's CRM system. Now, no CRM system is perfect, and there are always going to be some inaccuracies. But early on in the company's stage, you can create the seeds for having good data in your CRM, or you can be lax and not create good standards at all. And that becomes a real problem for running the revenue function in your company. So initially, a company gets a CRM, could be Salesforce, could be HubSpot, could be Zoho, could be whatever. This is not unique to any CRM. And everybody puts stuff in it. And there are very few controls over who does what or what's required. And it turns out that the people that use the CRM the most, which are your salespeople and your marketing people and your client success people, especially your salespeople, they couldn't care less about data quality because it's just not in their DNA. They're not wired that way. So they just put the minimum amount of what's required and they go on their merry way. You compound that over several years or lots of salespeople, and what you can end up with is a dumpster fire of a CRM, okay? And so as you try to scale your company and you try to understand how big your market is or what your penetration is into account or who to call or how to divide territories, you can't do it effectively because your data is a mess. There's duplicate accounts. When I say duplicates, that means IBM is spelled IBM, I period, B period, M period, IBM Incorporated, International Business Machines, etc. And if it's a company like Citigroup, or it's a company like, I don't know, General Electric or something that has lots of subsidiaries across the world, trying to scale your company globally and knowing how to assign your accounts becomes very problematic because different reps claim different accounts. You just don't know what you have or what's going on. So the solution to fixing this is to be very clear up front and create standards for what data you want to have in your CRM, and importantly, limiting the number of people who actually can put data into the CRM. This is hard to do because it adds cost initially, but it will pay off in spades later on because you'll have accurate information on which you can run your revenue team. Next and last case study, myopic territory design. So when a company starts out and they want to sell their product to the world, they're super excited about it. They'll hire 3, 4, 5 salespeople and they'll say, we want you to sell. We'll divide the United States into 5 groups, or we'll divide, 2 of you take the US, 1 of you takes Europe, 1 of you takes Asia. Sky's the limit, go sell. And that is actually just fine to do because you don't know how big your company is going to get or who's going to buy. So you just kind of go and experiment. So this just really creates a lot of flexibility. You might have a few disputes on people infringing on another's territory, but there's really enough space for everybody just to get along and be fine. Now, when you start having lots of reps, and when I say lots, when you get to 20 or when you get to 50, what happens is reps are all going for the easy wins and the low-hanging fruit, and they start to run into each other. And even though you might have someone that has a Northwest and someone that has a Northeast, somebody might have a buddy or a relative that works in the Northeast that's a friend. And so he or she will start to sell into a different territory. And as you scale the team, what happens is you start having deal disputes and arguments over deals, and then you also have a hard time creating territories for new salespeople. As a company grows, it's axiomatic. The number of territories has to grow, and the size of those territories or their scope has to shrink. It is a zero-sum game. The only way it's not zero-sum is you have to have more products, or you sell deeper within a territory. But territory shrinkage it's axiomatic. It's going to happen. And so salespeople hate this more than anything except having lower paychecks. They hate this because they feel that their possibility, their opportunity is being diminished by the company, and they resent it and they fight it. And so what you have to do when you set up territories is set expectations and rules to basically set up a structure so that when a company grows and when you need to bring more salespeople in, this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to give you as a rep early on, you can have a big patch, a big territory, but it's something that is not yours. We are lending it to you, and we are going to set the expectation that we are going to reduce it in the future, and this is how we're going to do it. And you need to know that this is going to take place. So much about managing and working with salespeople is setting expectations. And with this one in particular, you have to set the agreement and expectation up front. They will still cry foul 2 years later when you do it, but at least it's been disclosed to them, and they will not be able to accuse you, and they will understand that this is why we're doing it. And there are ways to make it more fair and lots of other things. I do a whole presentation on territories, but this is something you want to watch early on. Okay, let me stop there and see if there are any questions or comments from the group, and then I'll go to sort of the last phase of our slides.
Brent, I have some questions. I guess a question. So one of our biggest issues, we have reps across the country that are very territory oriented, and like physical territories are fine, but one of our biggest problems is once they become national accounts that they start crossing state territories, or they have 20 stores rather than just the one.
Yes.
What's your solution there?
So there are a number of options you can look at. Sometimes that deals with where the buying center is. You want to look at where the purchase decision gets made. If you sell to SMB companies, when you have franchisees and franchisors, that adds a level of complexity. But the principle of it, and I'm happy to talk offline with you, Spencer, is look at where does the purchase decision get made. You want to run your territories about who makes the decision about buying your product. If it's at an individual store level, or is it at a regional headquarters level, or is it a company headquarters or global headquarters? You want to focus on where the people who make the purchase decisions live, and then which person owns that territory. And likely what will happen is there'll be cases where those two are not aligned in your company. And that's where you're going to have to, that's where the hard work comes, because you want to be consistent. There'll be a handful of exceptions, but you want to set up your strategy of how you've got your reps set up to align with where the purchase gets made. And that is, go ahead.
The issue is many times those branch managers are the ones that pull the inventory from the warehouses or the stock or whatever, wherever they are. And so if you don't educate the branch managers and you're only rewarding the person that's at corporate, then the reps that are working in that area have no incentive to go visit the branch managers unless you like split commission or something.
This is true. So there's different ways to set it up, and I can offline this with you. Some of them deal with comp, and some of them dealing with coverage, and those two are interrelated. But yes, that's a common problem, and there are some solutions to that. Okay. So let me end on a couple of things. I first want to talk to you about the importance of getting revenue operations discipline in your company in an early stage. So this chart, I'm going to explain this, and hopefully it will make sense. What I have on this graph here, if I can get my little pin here set up, what I've tried to do is I've tried to say, in every company, you're going to have productivity costs. This is basically the cost of your company, your revenue organization not working well. There's friction, people don't understand one another, you don't have perfect information, you make mistakes, you might not have the right system, whatever it might be. And whatever those costs are, they are going to grow. Even if you have a superly well-run revenue operations function, you're going to have those costs, and those will increase the more and more people you have in your sales organization or your revenue organization. Ideally, you want to put in revenue operations discipline and at least the right foundation when you're around 25-ish, between 25 and 50 reps. You can go earlier, but usually at that point, you're not going to have created so many problems that you can't fix them without too much pain, sort of in this stage. What happens though is that revenue operations, especially capable leaders and staff, feel like a luxury for companies. Your CFO's like, yeah, I don't want to do it. I want to focus money on product development. I don't want to put the infrastructure in. The head of sales is like, yeah, I got this, no problem, really confident. And so what happens is it doesn't get invested in early on. And the cost of that underinvestment is not apparent in the early couple of years. However, it becomes a real problem later on and I'll illustrate a couple of examples. Let's say that in the beginning, you don't get your CRM set up correctly. When you're a small company, the cost of the wrong technology or bad data or bad processes is not too high because you can kind of fix them. You all work in the same organization or the same building. You can send a bunch of emails. You can kind of work through them. But when you get lots of people, the cost of the CRM being bad starts to grow in line with the size of your organization. So by the time you get to 800 people, if you have deep CRM problems, it is major surgery to get through this. Adobe had to try to fix this several years ago, the Lehigh organization. They were well past this point. And it was like millions of dollars and 2 or 3 year efforts to get their data and their CRM cleaned up. It was an absolute mess. And they never really got it done right. And so few of us will get to be as big as Lehigh Adobe and would all love to be shareholders there and all that good stuff. But what I'm trying to say is it would have been a lot easier if Omniture would have fixed this early on, and then when they merged, when Adobe bought them, they would have dealt with it right there and then than waiting for later. So likewise, if you have a compensation problem, if you have an annuity compensation plan, if you're down here, it's not too bad, but you get up to here and the cost of you, the financial cost of you overpaying people and the cost to try to change it is going to be very expensive. And so the key lesson that I've seen now working with 2 or 3 companies as a full-time person and then several clients is prevention is really important. So you want to bring in, you want to resource it with the right people, get it organizational power, and you want to do it soon so that later on you can scale more easily and you don't have as much friction and cost to fix things. Okay, last section, we're ready for Q&A. So what could you walk away with? 4 things you can do to help revenue help make sure you have a good foundation for revenue operations in your company. Some of these relate to the examples I've given. First of all, data quality. Go have whoever is in charge of your CRM, in charge of revenue, find some time to meet with them and just say, hey, let's talk about how accurate CRM data helps our business. There may be businesses where that's not important. I'm sure there are. There's got to be relatively few. But how important is data in our company? What do we mean by accurate data? What's our data standard? What do we expect to have happen? And align and agree on what that should be, and then figure out what controls will be needed to make this happen. Do we need to buy outside data? Do we need to change the controls? Do we need to have a kind of a tiger team effort for a quarter just to go and manually cleanse our data? But get ahead of it and solve that. That's something that you could address, this month, this next quarter. Compensation. If your comp plan has any residual in it whatsoever, I strongly encourage you to take a hard look at that and think about the long-term implications and how you can mitigate those, and if possible, eliminate that, so that after certainly at the latest 12 months, you're done with paying people on a residual. It's just a bad idea. I strongly recommend that. Accounts and territories. How do we define and assign our territories today? Do we have a culture of enforcing boundaries? Do we, when we create definitions, do we hold people to them, or have we fostered a culture of whoever has the most political capital, whoever's the biggest bully goes and steals accounts? If that's what you want in your sales org, is that what you want in your sales org? If not, let's fix it. And then think about to yourself, however many reps you have. If I hired 10 reps, if we thought there was opportunity, how would I change the territories? Let's say that you only sell in the US. How would I shift things up? And what's the process that I would use to do that? Doesn't mean that maybe 10 reps is 2 years away from you, but start thinking about what would that require and what do I need to put in place beforehand. Last, we haven't talked a lot about this, deal support. There's been lots of studies by really well-respected organizations about the importance of sales productivity, which is how much of a salesperson's time is spent engaging with customers versus not selling or doing administrative things around your company. And the shocking answer is it's a very large percent. And for every hour your rep is not talking or reaching out to a customer, that is definitely money they are not going to be generating for your revenue organization. Therefore, you want to ask yourself, how much, you can do a time study, this is not hard to do. How much time are my reps not selling? Why? What are they doing that other people or other technology could be doing instead so they spend more time selling? And then last, what do I need to do to change that? Is it a new process? Is it a new policy? Is it a new person? I could hire a $50,000 a year person that could basically take a lot of administrative load off my 4 reps that are making $200,000 a year, and that would just be X more clients that they could actually sell. It'll make their jobs happier, and the admin work will be done more effectively anyway. It's like a win-win-win. And so think about those 4 areas, and whether you're working with 5 people in your revenue organization, 50 or 500, each of these things would be topics would be meaningful sources of discussion with your revenue team. With that, I am off the slides, and I would love to entertain questions or comments from the team, or we can call it a day and you can go to lunch early.
Awesome. Thanks, Austin. We've had some good questions so far, but yeah, I've kind of budgeted to about 11:50 on all of these calls. So we've got about 6 more minutes for Q&A. And then I would encourage anyone else who has questions for Austin to connect with him and chat with him individually. So just unmute yourself if you got some questions and have a party.
Austin, I'm curious about your sales pitch to companies when they should be investing in some of these technologies and some of these concepts early on, but it's probably the toughest time for them to want to think about that or spend money on it. So what do you tell them? What's your pitch on that?
It's less about the pitch for me, and it's more about what can you do when your budget's limited. And I think just understanding what areas to focus on, like I reviewed with a number of CROs and CEOs that slide with those 10 icons and just say, hey, these are the areas that you need to focus on. And I talk with someone, they're like, oh, shoot, like we are deficient in these 5 or 6. And it's usually 5 or 6. And I talked to one a couple of weeks ago, and that company was, I would say mid-sized. They had, a not a ton of reps, but far along in terms of their business. And they had actually effectively addressed several of them and they'd fixed several. Like they used to have the annuity compensation model. They had fixed that. And so it was fairly small. But I think if you're a small company, you need to get, you either have your head of sales or you need to hire at least one person that's like a manager level that has, some level of organizational clout and be aware of these issues. So you don't have to hire, a VP level revenue ops person if you have 10 reps. That's really, you're not going to attract the right candidate, but you need to know the issues and at least have an advisor, have your salesperson come in. And for me, what makes me personally just excited as can be is say, hey, if I could spend 2 hours with your company once a month or 2 or 3 once a quarter and just help you avoid some of these traps that I have lost, hours of sleep fixing for these other companies, like that would make me really happy. And so whether it's, Unicorn Revenue Operations or another company, get in there and start making, take the relatively few steps that will create a good foundation. A lot of these things are very fixable and avoidable, but it's easier when you start early on. So I just kind of talked through that trade-off with them, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't, but that's consulting, right?
Cool. Thanks, Austin.
Sure. Others?
Hi, Hallie, if I can ask a question. Hi.
Yep.
Thanks, Austin. I jumped on later in the presentation than I'd hoped, but I got a lot out of what I heard. Thanks. I put it in the chat a question that I had, if you've had a chance to see it.
Okay.
I was recently asked to be essentially a representative leader for organizing community activities for a members-based business accelerator organization that is multinational and has different state chapters, including Utah. So I'm the rep now for Utah. The question is, because the directory list for the territories I have full access to the back room on has the members and guests organized according to compensation for the people who had done the sign-on benefit, not for the leaders like myself who have since come on board in a decades-old institution. The COO and others still have a model where you only get a sign-on if you bring in a new member. In the current virtual situation where territories are somewhat moot, having a gathering in order to invite your friends for a business meeting or luncheon is not possible. So how else can any kind of enticements be set up for a leader to get people on board? How else can the organization recognize the effort to not only go through the old brushwork of all of the old contacts that are outdated in the directory, and also update in a way that is meaningful and lucrative?
I give you points. For asking lots of questions and a single time. Let me just answer at a high level, and then we can maybe do an offline. This is an example of where you have a compensation plan that is disconnected from the roles and responsibilities of what's required to drive and maintain revenue. So you have the organization. This is a great illustration. I don't know if you saw the case study, where whoever signed up the account X number of years ago is still getting compensated and yet not doing the work that's required to maintain and grow an account. That is a poor compensation design, and you have to change the comp to change the behavior. So there are options around how to do that. They can either cost more money or they can be disruptive and create a little turmoil in the organization to get them fixed. And that's the spectrum. Happy to offline with you to learn a little bit more, but that's the core issue that you have, where roles and responsibilities are not aligned with the compensation.
Thank you. I brought that up as a question. I'll look forward to offline, and I'll put my stuff in the chat.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Austin. And Hallie, maybe time for one more question if anybody has it. Otherwise, we'll end our party.
Thanks, Austin.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Austin. You're a pro. It's pretty obvious. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. If you have additional questions, please reach out to Austin on LinkedIn or whatever is best, but I know he's there. It looks like he put his email up in the chat. We're going to end the meeting soon, so if you want that, grab it now. But appreciate all of your time and look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everybody.